Do you feel that you're trapped in repeating cycles even though you know you deserve so much more? Enough of accepting a life dominated by fear, insecurity, and mental patterns that feed emotional pain. There is a direct path to break the stagnation and access your true inner power. It begins with healing your inner child, reprogramming the unconscious, and transforming your inner state. Carl Jung showed that as long as we don't change from within, suffering and self-sabotage always return. Today I will show you how to activate your magnetic presence, restore emotional control, and unleash a force of psychological growth capable of transforming your life. If you feel that something is missing, that emptiness and insecurity are chasing you, stay with me until the end. I will give you the key to a definitive transformation. Go ahead and hit like to strengthen the channel. And if you're not yet subscribed, subscribe now so you won't miss content that can change your story. Your transformation begins now. Have you noticed that we are always restless, searching for something we can't even name yet feel deep in our skin? That search for inner fullness lives in all of us, even when it's silenced by mental patterns, the ego, or the daily hustle. It's common to think that suffering comes from external circumstances, but Carl Jung shows us that it's born of internal conflicts rooted in the unconscious. Many times we ignore our inner power and remain trapped in old habits that feed emotional pain and block our psychological growth. Suffering perpetuates because we resist the radical acceptance of our shadows and insist on maintaining unconscious patterns. Every escape or denial strengthens the ego and delays true inner transformation. Personal development isn't achieved only through external accomplishments, but through self-mastery, emotional detachment, and the courage to dive into the unconscious, acknowledging our own vulnerabilities. Fullness begins when we stop fleeing from silence, accept responsibility for our destiny, and choose the emotional alchemy of transcendence. How about trying a few minutes of silence today, observing your own thoughts without judgment? The journey isn't a destination, but a path of acceptance and self-transformation. At some point in childhood, we all experience emotional ruptures, big or small, moments when the affection we expected never arrived, or when the approval we craved was denied. Those experiences don't disappear. They lodge in the unconscious, forming the basis of our mental patterns and invisibly shaping our personal development. The inner child, for Carl Jung, is the personification of those memories. It carries both creative potential and the scars of emotional pain that, if unacknowledged, become silent suffering in adulthood. Notice how often we react excessively to criticism or rejection. It's the echo of that wounded child seeking care, even when our ego insists on hiding that vulnerability. When we give no space to heal those wounds, we live at the mercy of unconscious patterns that sabotage our emotional control. The way we love, relate, defend ourselves, or attack, all of it passes through the filter of those ancient hurts. It's almost like a hidden script, where the unconscious dictates the rules while our conscious mind believes it's in charge. That's fertile ground for unnecessary attachments, self-destructive behaviors, and a constant sense of emptiness, no matter how much we try to fill it with external achievements. Only when we look with radical acceptance at that inner child, without judgment, without rushing to fix, simply welcoming, do we begin to reclaim our inner power and rewrite our story from the inside out. Recognizing the inner child's wounds is an act of courage, self-mastery, and emotional detachment. It demands the will to break the cycle of suffering, setting aside the old victim role to become the protagonist of your own inner transformation. If you pay attention, you'll see that every repetitive behavior, every impulsive reaction or constant escape from silence stems from an unconscious desire to numb the pain. Yet fleeing discomfort only strengthens the ego and delays psychological growth. True emotional alchemy happens when we decide with magnetic presence to sit beside that pain and ask ourselves, what are you trying to show me? What haven't I accepted in myself? If you feel called to this healing, try a simple exercise. In a moment of silence, imagine yourself conversing with your inner child. Visualize her in a scene from your childhood. Observe her expression. Listen to what she needs to say. Note the sensations, words, and emotions that arise. Don't judge or correct, just accept. This is the first step to liberate yourself from mental patterns that keep you trapped in the past and begin a process of resilience, transcendence, and deep psychological growth. Are you ready to dive into this journey of self-knowledge? Pay attention. There are clear signs that your inner child still bleeds within you, even if your ego tries to mask or rationalize everything. Repetitive behaviors, those you swore you'd never repeat yet return like ghosts, are the unconscious inviting you to look at wounds that insist on remaining open. That emotional loop reveals how silent mental patterns dominate your life, obstructing true personal development and preventing the expression of your inner power. With each repetition, with each setback, the message is clear. As long as there's denial, there will be suffering. Another unmistakable sign is the constant need for approval, as if your self-validation always depended on others' gaze. That insatiable desire for acceptance isn't a whim. It's emotional pain born of early experiences where love was conditional, where simply existing never seemed enough. The unconscious records those scars and, you may not even realize it, you seek outside what can only be healed within. Radical acceptance, emotional detachment, and self-mastery. When the external dictates your value, emotional control is lost and life becomes a series of frustrated attempts to please or fit in, choking authenticity and suffocating the magnetic presence of your essence. The feeling of emptiness and insecurity that sometimes invades your chest is one of the greatest signs of an unhealed inner child. No matter how many successes you achieve, that sense that something's missing always remains. That fullness never feels permanent. That happens because psychological growth was interrupted by unprocessed pains, shadows not yet integrated. Often, that emptiness manifests physically: insomnia, anxiety, bodily aches, that restless energy that won't go away. All of it is the body's language of the unconscious, trying to call your attention to what truly needs transformation, the emotional alchemy of embracing your own shadows. Upon identifying these signals, it's essential to resist the urge to find scapegoats or hide behind justifications. The path is about facing these manifestations with honesty and courage, acknowledging the inner child's role in building your current patterns. Practice the silence exercise. Instead of reacting automatically, pause, breathe, observe the feelings that arise without identifying with them. Ask yourself, where does this fear, this need, this emptiness come from? Only then do you create space for transcendence, radical acceptance, and true inner transformation. Are you willing to face these signs responsibly and open a new door to your personal development? The time has come to approach healing not as a one-off event, but as a continuous, courageous immersion into the unconscious. This path requires deep introspection and the willingness to acknowledge emotions you learned to suppress long ago. Jung said, "What you resist persists." And only when we stop fleeing old pains do we open space for genuine inner transformation. Do you feel the weight of a repeating pattern? Try closing your eyes, taking a deep breath, and asking yourself, what am I feeling right now? Where does this discomfort come from? This simple act, done with silence and honesty, already initiates the emotional alchemy capable of dissolving old bonds. Reintegrating repressed memories and sensations is a fundamental stage of this process. It's not about forcibly unearthing traumas, but about allowing, at your own pace, what the unconscious is ready to bring to the surface. Often it's in the everyday, in a conversation, a scent, a gesture, that memories emerge, asking for care. Instead of resisting or judging yourself for feeling, practice self-mastery. Welcome, observe, allow yourself to cry if needed. Inner power blooms when you stop trying to control or escape, and instead radically accept all that's part of your story. Symbols and the unconscious's language are great allies in this process. Jung reminds us that the unconscious speaks in images, dreams, sensations, and synchronicities. Pay attention to the signs: recurring dreams, odd sensations around certain people, songs that move you for no apparent reason. Those details, observed with magnetic presence, function as maps of psychological growth. Write down your dreams, draw your feelings, use creativity to dialogue with what emerges. It's in those small bridges between conscious and unconscious that the power of transformation and transcendence resides. Commit now to never dodge the healing process again, even when it feels uncomfortable or slow. Have the courage to take small steps every day. Practice inner silence. Jot down your feelings. Embrace your shadow. Remember that each act of radical acceptance is a victory over the ego and a step toward true self-mastery. The process is continuous, challenging yet liberating. Ready to cross the threshold of your own healing and welcome a new version of yourself? From Carl Jung's perspective, the feminine essence goes far beyond appearances and traditional roles. It represents a universal quality, accessible to all, men and women alike, an archetype in the collective unconscious manifesting as intuition, sensitivity, creativity, and emotional flow. Yet when the inner child remains wounded, that natural feminine energy can become blocked, prevented from flourishing fully. This shows up as difficulty trusting yourself, losing lightness, and disconnecting from intuition, creating a void that external achievements cannot fill. Only reunion with your own inner power can. Throughout life, experiences of emotional pain and rejection shape our relationship with the feminine, whether through excessive self-demand, fear of vulnerability, or refusal to heed that inner voice whispering simple solutions while the rational mind overcomplicates things. The unconscious, via mental patterns formed in childhood, builds walls around our essence. Self-mastery begins when we recognize those blocks and accept, emotionally detached, that trust and lightness were buried not from lack of courage, but from protective mechanisms born of suffering. By restoring trust and intuition, and valuing the magnetic presence emerging from that deep feminine, something extraordinary happens. Body language softens, creativity expands, and emotional self-sufficiency ceases to be an unreachable goal and becomes an everyday experience. Personal development, in this light, is not about fixing defects but reintegrating soul aspects rejected out of fear or insecurity. Here lies emotional alchemy's secret: accepting, with love and truth, all fragments of your essence, even those the ego would rather hide. Now the invitation is to look inward and ask, where in my life have I denied my feminine essence? What situations still make me distrust my intuition or pull me away from natural lightness of being? Practice silence. Listen to your body. Notice small resistances arising in daily life. Remember, unlocking feminine energy isn't a privilege. It's a right for those who choose psychological growth, transmuting pain into inner power and suffering into radical acceptance. Ready to reclaim that strength and restore your intuition's magic? The shadow, as Jung taught, is all you learned to deny, hide, or reject in yourself to feel accepted or avoid emotional pain. It inhabits the unconscious's depths, waiting to be recognized not as an enemy but as a vital part of your development. Ignoring the shadow perpetuates suffering and repeating mental patterns that create anguish, self-sabotage, and internal conflicts seeming to have no end. True self-mastery only arises when we stop fleeing those dark aspects and open ourselves to radical acceptance of who we are. Light and shadow, strength and vulnerability. Emotional repressions often manifest in body and soul: baseless anxiety, psychosomatic illnesses, sudden anger, crying crises, or creative blocks. The unconscious, through body language and emotions, always tries to reveal what the ego insists on ignoring. Not seeing the shadow means letting it run your life from the shadows, reinforcing suffering, undermining inner power, and blocking the magnetic presence that could be your great ally. True emotional alchemy occurs when we have the courage to observe those symptoms and ask ourselves, what are they trying to tell me about myself? Giving new meaning to past experiences is revolutionary. When you accept your flaws, limitations, and pains with brutal honesty, something transforms. The past stops being a burden and becomes a source of resilience. That psychological growth doesn't happen all at once, but each time you choose to welcome discomfort instead of reacting impulsively or blaming the world. Here, transcendence takes on a new dimension. It's not about conquering pain but integrating, becoming whole, turning each wound into learning and each shadow into fuel for your own inner transformation. What if today, instead of denying your shadow, you began observing it as a sacred part of your journey? Try a simple exercise. The next time a strong emotion arises, instead of repressing it, pause, take a deep breath, and feel. Ask yourself, where does this come from? What is my shadow trying to protect or compensate? Write about your discoveries. With practice and courage, you'll see that the shadow isn't an enemy, but the guardian of your inner power and the portal to a more authentic life. Ready to embark on this voyage and experience the freedom of being whole? Authenticity isn't just a pretty concept. It's the solid foundation for any true inner transformation, as Jung proposed. Being authentic means breaking inherited mental patterns and embracing, without fear, all parts of yourself, including those the ego would rather camouflage to seek approval or avoid suffering. Self-mastery is born from that brave act of setting healthy boundaries, saying no to what harms and yes to what nourishes your soul. Body language changes, your gaze gains magnetic presence, and unconscious energy ceases to be hostage to the past and becomes an ally of transcendence and psychological growth. True self-love demands emotional detachment and radical acceptance of your own humanity. Lights and shadows, strength and fragility. It's common, amid suffering, to seek validation from others that should come from within. But every attempt to fill the void with external recognition only reinforces old patterns of dependence and insecurity. Inner power flourishes when you allow yourself to rediscover your own worth without needing an audience or external validation. This isn't achieved overnight. It requires daily practice, inner silence, and the courage to stay true to your own truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Freeing yourself from old patterns means abandoning autopilot and taking full responsibility for your choices. It's not about perfection but honesty, noticing when you repeat behaviors that no longer serve you and, with resilience, choosing new paths. Transcendence isn't linear but demands constant presence, attentive listening to your inner child's needs, and the willingness to rewrite your own story, page by page. Jung said that individuation is becoming who you really are, and that process only begins when you have the courage to face your imperfections, celebrating each step of your growth. Try a practical exercise. Every time you notice self-criticism or harsh judgment, pause. Take a deep breath and, in silence, acknowledge your humanity. Tell yourself, I'm learning, I'm evolving. Reinforce your boundaries, practice emotional detachment, and celebrate small daily victories. Little by little, self-love becomes natural. Authenticity solidifies, and inner transformation begins to radiate into all areas of your life. Ready to make this commitment to yourself and experience a life of freedom, truth, and emotional self-sufficiency? By immersing yourself in self-mastery and deep work with the unconscious, you discover that inner transformation never happens in isolation. Each act of transcendence, each cycle of emotional detachment, and every moment of radical acceptance reverberates not only in your own story, but in the invisible fabric of the collective. Jung pointed out that when you heal your internal wounds, you become a silent beacon, a living example of resilience and inner power, capable of illuminating the path for other women still trapped in the same mental patterns, dominated by emotional pain and inherited suffering. That personal healing breaks the chains of the collective unconscious, challenging ego-imposed limits and inspiring new forms of magnetic presence and body language in the world. When you have the courage to transform your own shadows, you not only free yourself but also open space for others to recognize themselves in your psychological growth journey. Small gestures, authentic choices, and daily acts of self-mastery function as seeds sown in the fertile soil of the collective, encouraging other women to break the cycle of self-sabotage and seek their own emotional alchemy. It's essential to understand that genuine transformation spreads beyond the personal sphere. It breaks intergenerational patterns and offers a gift of freedom to future generations. The impact of your resilience and self-mastery transcends time, creating an invisible legacy of radical acceptance, authenticity, and transcendence. By transforming your relationship with the unconscious and restoring inner power, you rewrite not only your story but that of everyone who crosses your path. Children, friends, sisters, or strangers inspired, often unknowingly, by your silent courage. Each step on the journey of psychological growth is a silent revolution, transforming both you and the world around you. Your individuation process is a living gift to those still trapped in the autopilot of suffering and unconscious mental patterns. Ready to be not only the protagonist of your own inner transformation but also an inspiration and turning point for the feminine and human collective? The time has come to turn knowledge into living experience. Healing your inner child doesn't depend on tomorrow or perfect conditions. It begins now. This very moment you recognize your active role in your own personal development. Allow yourself to stop everything for a few minutes and immerse in silence. Observe your feelings, listen to the unconscious's language, notice your body's subtle signals, and welcome emotional pain without judgment. Only with radical acceptance and emotional detachment from old mental patterns can you activate true inner power and begin the emotional alchemy of transcendence. Share your discoveries. Don't keep your transformation to yourself. By sharing experiences, you build bridges of resilience, inspire other women to face suffering, and seek self-mastery in life's challenges. Try recording your daily reflections, writing about the shadows you've welcomed, the emotions integrated, and the boundaries rebuilt. Turn self-knowledge into habit. Foster honest conversations about emotional control, magnetic presence, and psychological growth in your social circle. Remember, your vulnerability can be the spark that frees someone else who still feels trapped by their ego. This is the call to abandon autopilot once and for all and take full responsibility for your inner transformation. If resistance arises, observe it with curiosity and compassion. If you stumble, celebrate the learning. The healing path is built with daily choices and small victories over yourself. Break the cycle of self-sabotage. Choose today to take a conscious step towards self-mastery, self-love, and the psychological growth you deserve. So, what are you waiting for? Look within, recognize your unconscious patterns, accept your shadow, and move forward with courage. Healing isn't a destination, it's a daily commitment, a gift for you and for future generations. Ready to take the first real step toward your own transformation? Which unconscious pattern holds you back the most today? Share your answer here in the comments. I want to know your story and how you're facing this journey of inner transformation. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any content that can further accelerate your personal development. Watch the next recommended video on your screen now and continue diving into this process of self-mastery and liberation. Goodbye and master your unconscious.